Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Futurum Tech Webcast. I'm your host, Shelley Kramer, and I'm joined today by my colleague here at Futurum, fellow analyst, Ron Westfall. Hello, Ron. How are you today?
Good Friday. Feeling pretty good. Looking forward to the weekend, naturally.
Always. So in our conversation today, we are going to take a look at, we did a fairly comprehensive research study here in the last few months, looking at the BSS-to-Cloud journey. And, what's happening in the industry, what we're seeing in terms of, moving BSS systems to the cloud, what the challenges are. And so we thought we'd share with you some of the insights that we came across as a result of our survey and, just kind of taking a look at some of the key takeaways. So with that, we're off. So Ron, let's talk a little bit about the advantages of a multi-vendor strategy. Now, a lot of times, people make the decision to just go with one vendor, maybe fall for a sales pitch, which sometimes isn't a bad thing. But I do think that there's a lot to think about when it comes to what your strategy is, whether it's a multi-vendor strategy, whether it's a single vendor strategy. So share with us a little bit about, what our research showed in that, Ron, and then what your thoughts on that are.
Excellent kicking off point, Shelley. And it's so critical. Clearly, an operator is not a consumer deciding to buy, for example, an Apple smartphone. They really do want to fundamentally avoid a vendor lock-in. And there's a lot of great reasons for that. Part of it's history and part of it's common sense. They just need that versatility, that agility to be able to, progress their cloud journey according to the situation that dictates it, but also according to their mission, according to the business outcomes that they are prioritizing. And that was an unequivocal takeaway. I think it was pretty well understood. Now we know that with more certainty in terms of the data points. And I think that is something that came out because when we asked them, the operators, what are your cloud options that you're considering over the next 1 to 2 years? Incredibly, AWS doubled in that number. Now it's leading in that regard with a 71% preference. But what's also equally important is that all of the major cloud providers also had an increase in interest. For example, Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure all came in above 60%. And so this is pretty much demonstrating that for sure the operators are going to be committed to that multi-cloud strategy. And this is going to be essential to any vendor who is supplying technology to the operators, but certainly a key BSS supplier in terms of addressing this evolving space.
Yeah.
What I think is also critically important to note here is that it's not just about looking at public cloud options. It's also about the private cloud.
Right.
And I think one key data point that came across was in terms of direction that the operator is looking at. Over 40% selected the private cloud direction. And so this is important to note because, first of all, there's a geographical aspect here. This is definitely most prominent within the Latin American region, but it's also less important, for example, within the Asia Pacific region, where they're further along with working with third cloud providers. And I think it's also important because once you get the private cloud implementation right, then there is more interest in adopting a hybrid cloud approach that is, blending public and private together. And I think that was also another important takeaway is that those operators that had the most experience with their hybrid cloud implementations also had the most satisfaction because they simply gain more experience, gain more knowledge in terms of, being able to understand what is going to be important in terms of making a cloud journey successful. And we'll touch on this more, for example, having more cloud native capabilities built in to the plan, into the blueprint. And I think
don't get ahead of ourselves, Ron.
Okay, I promise not to do too much of that. And but I think it's also because of that platform providers like VMware are playing an important role, as well as Red Hat. as well as potentially more HPE Esmeralda,
Right.
because clearly they provide the capabilities to enable private cloud optimization and aiding in terms of a hybrid approach as these particular operators look more at what are the public cloud options that we can now use to further optimize the cloud journey, in particular the
Right.
BSS to cloud journey.
A couple of things that occurred to me as you were talking is one is vendor lock-in is a very, very key consideration across every technology purchasing decision today. And I think that's really important. I think that people have learned um, how in many instances this is a really negative thing, and we don't know what we don't know, right? And so you go down a path, you pick a vendor, after you've seen and heard a number of pitches, and sometimes you don't realize how locked in you'll be and what the ramifications for that are. And I think because we're seeing the pace of digital transformation accelerate so rapidly over the course of the last year. I think people are really starting to realize that vendor lock-in is something that we need to put at the top of our agenda. And people are more educated now about understanding what that is, understanding the challenges, and talking about that right up front as they're thinking about making a decision. Um, the other thing that I thought was interesting to your point about AWS, I thought it was really interesting, this data point that, we talk about AWS, we talk about Azure, we talk about Google Cloud, the big three. But what we also saw in our research here was that, a significant number of respondents are planning on using IBM Cloud and planning on using Oracle Cloud. And so there are other key players. Some of them are planning on using Alibaba Cloud. So I think it's interesting that there are some key players in this space above and beyond just those, the big three that we think about initially. So I thought that was to me, that was an interesting data point.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. And I think we can understand that. For example, Google Cloud, Google really is an SDN juggernaut. I think
Right.
that's a plausible assertion. And, they're the ones who invented Kubernetes. And as a result, they would be a good partner to work with in terms of, for example, Kubernetes orchestration,
Right.
Kubernetes management applications. Also, they have a successful edge deployment, that is the YouTube content network.
Right.
And, the operators have a great deal of edge assets, a great
Right.
deal of edge real estate that can be leveraged for, similar capabilities further down the line.
Yeah.
And so these are some of the reasons why, Google Cloud would be a partner to work with, at least one of the partners of a multi-cloud
Right.
strategy. And yeah, I think IBM Cloud is understandable because, for example, IBM, like Microsoft, has a vast enterprise presence. And that's another reason why Microsoft Azure would be attractive, because they both have that enterprise DNA that they can
Right.
help the operators sell more effectively into those verticals,
Yeah.
certainly as part of a 5G monetization strategy, for
Well,
example.
absolutely. And if you're already a Microsoft house or you're already an IBM house, integrating those cloud solutions in, kind of a no-brainer.
Yes, and certainly Red Hat, part of IBM,
Right.
can help in terms of hybrid cloud implementation. So it's actually very positive for the industry, because already there are a lot of, I think, very strategic choices that the operators can enlist to their competitive benefit, to their mutual benefit.
Right.
And this is all very positive. And yes, Alibaba, for example, yes, there are geopolitical considerations that restrict their ability to play in some regions, but where they don't have those
Right.
restrictions, clearly the operator would want to work with them in terms of offering a new 5G capability, or whatever else that is something that is going to be at the top of their monetization agenda. So yes, this is, I think, very clear. And back to AWS, I think one reason why they are gaining more interest is that they have vast influence in the developer community.
Yeah.
And we know this is going to be an ecosystem play, that more than ever, the operators have to be adept at working with developers and being able to deliver innovation, but also these new capabilities, these new applications closer to the customer, or being able to better sell into a vertical, et cetera. Basically, it's use case networking that is going to become more vital because it's using those network slicing and microservices capabilities that are instrumental to any cloud implementation. So really, it's good news. It's exciting, but it's also challenging, and it'll also have some things you have to really have in place to make it work optimally. For example, a multi-cloud orchestration and policy framework. Obviously, if you're working with one cloud provider, you want to make sure it's synced up in terms of working with another cloud provider, so nothing gets stalled out. Obviously, that would defeat the whole purpose. But again, there are the BSS suppliers such as Ericsson that can certainly address that capability, and I think this is all coming together. That it's enabling more ability to advance that cloud journey, particularly when it comes to, for example, a more stepwise type approach.
Mm-hmm. So, great overview there, and I want to move along. And while this conversation, of course, is about Ericsson in some ways, because this is a research study that we partnered with them on. It's really about the BSS to cloud journey in particular as a whole, not only specific to Ericsson. That said, you just mentioned Ericsson, and there is some news this week that AWS announced an extension of its long-term partnership with Ericsson, and they've certified Ericsson's Telecom BSS portfolio on AWS, which is a pretty big deal. And, so talk with us a little bit about the ecosystem implications of this announcement.
Yes, this is a significant announcement. I see it as having, a lot of implications for the operators to have those, strategic options in place. I think, yes, you hit a key point there, Shelley. This is an extension of an existing partnership.
Right.
Ericsson and AWS have already been working together, for example, in terms of offering managed IoT services. And this is something that will certainly benefit from, a cloud strategy. And I think right off the bat, there are two things that indicate why this alliance, the extension of the alliance, can offer a great deal in terms of innovation in the very near term.
Right.
For example, it emphasized the fact that AI ML engines are going to play a key role in how successful a BSS to cloud journey is, or a telco BSS to the cloud journey is.
Super important.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I think this is something that we just saw in the last week. We saw, IBM, and, we saw other vendors like Juniper all touting NVIDIA. The strategic importance of AI in terms of making something such as automation work across the board, and also enabling more intelligent decision making, enabling those real time capabilities that are quite simply missing with a traditional BSS implementation, let alone other key parts of the network. And I think that is something that jumped right out. And I think another one is the emerging interest in infrastructure as code. And what that means is that it enables the users to manage their data centers through quite simply machine readable definition files. And what is important there is that it allows them to transition away from manual configuration of hardware in order to realize these capabilities. So I think this announcement is touting this capability, and we're going to see that become more important. We had, infrastructure as a service for many years. That's how, AWS and Azure and others
still do.
Yes, they
still
certainly
do.
have it, and that's how they got started in a key way. And so now we're looking at infrastructure as a code. So stay tuned in terms of, here is, the next innovation breakthrough that's going to make a huge difference. And I think what's also important about this announcement, it helps crystallize what an operator really needs to understand and prioritize in terms of making a BSS to cloud journey successful. First of all, you have to have the top leadership on board. They have to be driving this. You have to have the executive suite deciding, okay, this is vital to our long-term competitiveness.
Right.
And I think we've learned some hard lessons when you have, for example, only the CIO office driving this,
Right.
and not having, for example, the CFO on board.
Right.
Boom. It just the digital transformation effort, the cloud transition effort just fizzled.
No.
And so we now know that it has to be the executive team all aboard, all pretty much committed to this.
It's a culture shift. I mean, we've talked about this, ad nauseum as it relates to any digital transformation initiative. And it is a culture shift, and it has to be something that the organization as a whole and its culture embraces. So you're right. It's not just the CIO, but it's also not just, the senior leaders. I mean, it truly is, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is what it's going to involve. This is how it's going to change our company. This is how it's going to help us serve our customers better. I mean, it really is about that. And I know in the conversations that we had earlier on our show with some of the Ericsson team, they talked about that in real world circumstances. I'll link those shows to our show notes here, but really how, culture is so, so important as it relates to this. And, that, and then also using, a stepwise approach to, attain best outcomes. So it's really about mapping out a plan in advance. You don't wing it. It's like any business strategy, right? And this BSS to cloud journey requires you to really map out every part, every step of the way. And I think that's part of the key to success.
No, I think you read my mind perfectly. That segues perfectly, Shelley, into the second point, which is that cultural shift. It has to be an organization-wide blueprint, and I think we understand that better now. I think we're seeing practices such as CI/CD pipelines, as well as DevOps frameworks, enabling that organization-wide commitment. And it's also very important for overcoming the top barrier that was invoked from our survey, and that is the ability for the IT and network side of the organization to work together.
Right.
And it's through those formats that we're seeing, better coordination between the IT and the network side, but also equally important other parts of the organization, the marketing side, and so forth. And so this is all part of that cultural shift that starts with the executive team commitment and fundamentally disseminating across the entire organization and being able to advance that cloud journey on that stepwise approach that is so important. And I think that we know now that a big bang approach will just not work. That goes back to what the hard lessons we saw, and so that was I think that that third takeaway from the announcement is that clearly Ericsson and AWS are going to be working with the operators in terms of enabling that, i.e., get one part of the BSS stack right. For example, the digital experience, the customer experience portal.
Right.
And once you get that hammered down, once you get that running optimally as you can, then you turn to another part of the stack and not, get them all bunched up, and, it just causes confusion and complexity. Right. And that leads to I think the final takeaway I want to emphasize is that it requires a cloud native approach. It requires that the organization, first of all, understands that they have to develop their software, they have to develop their capabilities on a cloud native basis. We know now that if you take a legacy application, legacy software that's been running on an on-premise data center for years or even decades, and simply try to port it into a cloud environment, that doesn't work. You really do need to reskill personnel to become adept at cloud native, bring on cloud native expertise, also quite fundamentally align your portfolio so that it has that cloud native built in, so that quite simply the cloud journey can advance, that it can be successful. And so, it's like you almost have to tattoo cloud native across the forehead of the team to make sure that this will happen.
And this all sounds like a lot. And in terms of a business transformation, and, we're immersed in this, we talk about this all the time. We also understand that it's not easy. It's often not easy and it's not fast and it's also not cheap. But the thing about this is that for CSPs, this is really an inevitable part of business transformation. And you can delay this. But what's going to happen is that, you're going to be challenged by your ability to innovate, and you're going to be challenged by, being able to monetize, and, all things related to 5G. So, it kind of is one of those things that this needs to be, you're going to migrate your BSS to the cloud. I'm pretty confident with that. And it does need to be something that you put on your business strategy roadmap.
That's so true, Shell. I think one thing that we also learned from the survey is that the sooner you begin, the better the outcomes will be further out, the
Right.
more satisfaction there will be. And I think why that's important is that by starting, you will then get more reasonable expectations that the level set for what needs to be done to accomplish this sets in. And that's
Right.
again getting more knowledge, cutting your teeth, and I think that is just key. You have to just overcome the fear of the
Dive
unknown,
in.
and
Dive in.
and dive in exactly, and you'll discover like, oh, okay, this works. This is rewarding. This is what is a lesson learned. And now we know that, okay, we're not just going to wait another year and say, okay, we're going to cut over the next year. No, that's something that is implausible, and that would be unfortunate for any cloud decision makers, or I mean any operator decision makers who might still be in that stall mode. And that, I think, is something that we now know is not going to work. It makes the problem worse. And as a result, we've already seen that it makes a big difference across the board
Yeah.
to get that cloud journey going and to keep at it.
Absolutely. So I want to shift a little bit. And, truly, whether we're talking about a BSS to cloud journey or some other integration of technology into your software stack, that is a big business decision. And I think that part of, you know, I was writing something the other day, and something about I was editing something about your digital transformation journey is complete. And, I scratched that out with a big red pencil, which I didn't really do with a red pencil because, of course, I did it on my computer, but you knew what I meant. But your digital transformation journey is never over. And what we know to be true is that change is inevitable. Evolution, innovation, all of those things are things that need to be happening within your organization, regardless of, whether you're a CSP or any other kind of an organization. And I think I know what we're seeing a lot in the industry today is smart strategic partnerships, and it's learning and understanding that we can't do everything on our own. We can't even find the tech talent that we need to completely staff up ourselves. And really, do we need to do everything ourselves? And that's really where, to me, one understanding that a digital transformation journey is all about embracing continuous change, continuous learning, continually, testing and tweaking and launching and, all of those things. And, be innovating quickly, failing fast, all of those things. But I think that really being smart about making strategic partnerships, and again, whether it's for your BSS to cloud journey or some other partnership as it relates to some technology need that you have, I think really that's the important path forward. It's a key takeaway for anyone listening to this conversation: is don't think that you have to, or that you necessarily can do it all yourself, because that's really not the case.
Oh, that is so true. And again, I think reemphasize that clear point, Shelley, that it's also about the ecosystem,
Right.
and it's clearly, it's enlisting developers and being able to, come up with the right size solution, et cetera. And I think it also points to the rising importance of partner management.
Right.
We saw, for example, that customer satisfaction and improving time to market were certainly top drivers for a lot of the operator decision making, and this, clearly is pulling through the fact that in order for that to succeed, the operator has to, devote attention along the lines that you're just talking about in terms of, making partner management more effective. What is going to work best, particularly in B2B or B2B to X environments. That I think is something that clearly the operators are looking at in terms of how they're going to diversify their revenues and how they're going to thrive in a 5G environment and so forth. So all that is fundamentally true. And I think it ties into another important takeaway from the survey. And what are the top cloud design principles that the operators are looking at? And there was naturally a wide array of options, all of them, compelling in their own way. However, the top three that came out of that was first of all, elastic deployments, being able to have that built-in ability to meet the needs of the customer, but also the context. And you think, okay, well, shouldn't it just be a matter of scaling? And actually, yeah, most of it will be like being able to scale more. By having elastic scalability, the operator can bring on more customers quickly, can bring on more applications rapidly, et cetera. But it's also about, again, that context. For example, we talked about the stadium use case, where you have 50,000 or 80,000 people all gathered at once, and certainly there's going to be a surge in demand
Right.
for bandwidth and other policy and intelligence capabilities to
Right.
make that experience optimal for those who are subscribing to that. But as we know, that event ends, and then suddenly
Yeah.
the bandwidth requirements get throttled back. And what you really don't want is that legacy issue of what was called stranded bandwidth. Like you had to build out X amount of bandwidth to that stadium to enable those capabilities. And well, that's where it stood, even when the stadium wasn't being used for long stretches of time. And that
Right.
certainly came out during the pandemic,
Right.
where that would have been even more of a liability. And so it's that elastic deployment capability. Most of it will be upscaling or being able to bring on more, but it's also about right sizing and being able to address the contextual experience. The other top three design principle is microservices. And
Right.
so we need to address that. That's also aligned with enabling network slicing. And what's important here, it's enabling the operator to use containers, to use Kubernetes orchestration capabilities to fundamentally create a service when the customer wants it, or to be able to serve a vertical more specifically. So you can create from the existing network a specific service that meets the needs of, say, a manufacturing plant, that
Right.
meets the needs of a mining operation, and so on and so forth. So I think this is going to be a big difference maker as to why this is going to be worthwhile, why the operators are going to be essential in the digital ecosystem within the 5G era. And the third one is our friend automation. I think we've seen how this can be better enabled. Part of it is just building into the applications and building into the processes automation. Once
Right.
tasks that were done manually are now automated, and this can help the entire workforce. But it also shows why there's so much investment focus on AI and ML capabilities, because those are going to be the things that will enable this automation, certainly on a mass scale basis, on an agile basis, and
Right.
so forth. There's just no way around that. So it's good to see that being tied in our viewpoint and on our perspective on the BSS to cloud journey.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a terrific conversation, and I hope that, if you're a CSP thinking about starting your to cloud journey, whatever stage it is that you're in, I hope this conversation and some of these talking points and some of these insights from our research report have been helpful to you or will be helpful to you. And in our show notes today, I will include a link to that report that you can download. But with that, I'm going to say thanks to our audience for hanging out with us today. And Ron, it's always a pleasure to talk about, nerdy stuff like BSS to cloud journeys with you.
Likewise, Shelley. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. All right. We'll see you soon, my friend.